First one, I want to make a point precisely apropos of this eternal Marx, philosophers have only interpreted. I totally agree with you and you because I have it myself. But what I really want to say is that this is especially actual today when we hear again and again this reproach how, okay, we do here alone our subversive readings, but what does this practically mean? Even some of our people who should be our friends fall into this trap. Like, I was quite shocked. This is why he will join you and Gregor Moder, Frederick Jameson in the famous Gulag cell, where he bought this theory that we literally, I was shocked to hear him say it, that we live in a totally cynical era where ideology is no longer operative, ideology in an authentic sense of people really believing in some basic, that today we have simply totally cynical power which without any pretenses does what it does, doesn't even take itself seriously. So his conclusion was, we no longer need critique of ideology. Because like, it's already, his idea was that if you take, he takes the example of some cynical statements by Donald Rumsfeld and so on, you don't have any need for a subtle, you know, in Althusserlian terms, you read the absences, the presence of absences, symptomatic signs, it's all there. It's no longer needed, this complex symptomal procedure of reading. That's why his conclusion is the same as Chomsky's. Somebody who recently had lunch with Chomsky told me that Chomsky repeatedly told him that who needs today complex theories? Things are so obvious that we just have to inform people about this American plot, what they are doing here in Afghanistan there. You show them pictures of Guantanamo and so on. Who needs a theory?
That really helped, the pictures of Guantanamo.
Sorry?
The pictures of Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo really helped.
No,
they didn't help.
No, what I would say, on the contrary, I'm of course, like, I hope we all share this, that to totally oppose this. First, I think that I try to develop, especially the pictures from Guantanamo. Listen, maybe you know the story, but I like it. When pictures were first published, I showed them, you know, especially those iconic pictures of a guy in some kind of a Ku Klux Klan cover like this. I showed this to friends who didn't yet hear. I had a couple of hours advantage here, and showed them these images and asked them, what is this? What do you think this is? You know what was the answer that I usually got? Were you in Lower Manhattan to some of these
art performance?
High performance off Broadway. Are you into avant-garde theater now or whatever? And I think that effectively this was not simply abstract torture. They were effectively, how should I put it, introducing Iraqi people into the obscene underside of the American culture. Those images there, I refer here to you, although I'm using my constructionist declaration, but these were literally quotations.
Yeah, they were.
If you don't understand this, if you just directly read it as a humiliation and so on, you don't get it. Even further, I claim that the difficulty of saying today it's just brutal, raw financial capitalism, who needs interpretation and so on. No. Naivety is here more than ever. Just think about it. The last financial crisis, let's say that it exploded because people didn't know what they were doing. But if you look at it closely, yes, on the one hand we have good proof that the crisis of 2008 was, one even has the right to be a little bit paranoid, I think. It was cooked up by some banks to screw up other banks and so on. So it wasn't just something exploded, it was a well-planned operation. But nonetheless, basically, we should never forget that this fiasco of 2008 was cooked up not by some leftist idealists who were spending too much, who were caught in their illusions. The crisis was the result precisely of the most cynical political ideology. big bankers who think, screw ideology, we just care about brutal speculation, profit, and so on. So we have to accept the paradox that utter cynicism, this brutal financial cynicism, is maybe the most naive position one can imagine today. And I think the whole of the 20th century demonstrates this. Look at Germany, Hitler. I mean, financial capital, big capital supported Hitler because they thought, oh, this is a clown, you know. We need him for 2-3 years to get rid of the communists then, and so on and so on. And yes, they were right. In the end, they just used Hitler. They did get rid of him, but quite a lot of things happened before they get rid of him. Okay, so here we agree. And my basic point, back to your point. So when we hear that, what can we do with our theory, capitalism goes on, and so on and so on, I would say that I'm more and more convinced that it's almost the opposite that is true. That on the one hand, maybe the truly subversive thing today, and by subversive I mean a thing which really has effects, is not to engage in any dreams how to change, but a brutal constatation, to really present what goes on. And I claim that the problem is maybe that most of the critical analysis, you know, pass to how to change it too quickly even. You know, the immediate, like whenever you talk about poverty, instead of, I think it's much more mobilizing even in the long term, to simply describe poverty in Africa, in Congo, that's how it is. I don't see any way out, the shit will go on for at least 10 years. I found this much more awakening, in the long term mobilizing, than the Bill Gates game, or even Soros game, you know. Yeah, but I have no foundation, we can do something, and so on, all that. So I would say that today, it's precisely this need to, when you present a terrifying situation, to immediately point out a way, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, we can do this, that, which prevents actual change. So we shouldn't be such pessimists. To brutally describe the situation we are in today is maybe the most cruel thing. Let me go on just with a couple of points. First, about Hegel and literature, if I may supplement your Marx and literature. Do you know a book that I used by some guy whose name I forgot, strange sounding name, who did a book on Hegel and literature, where in a wonderful way, very concretely, he reads phenomenology of spirit with the point of why the role of literary references in phenomenology is very limited. It begins in the middle of chapter of reason, precisely Cervantes, Don Quixote, Schiller, and so on, and then it explodes in the chapter of on spirit, Antigone, up to at the end, don't forget, at least implicit reference to Diderot, to Rousseau, and so on. But it's only there, and that would be, and I agree with you with this generalization, everything is literature. Yes, but this doesn't mean that we should just swim in this generality. For me, it's all the more important to state where, precisely since, in some sense, everything is literature, where literature as such nonetheless appears. Yeah. So what I would say is that, yeah, that a nice example of what you are saying, how getting rid of literature through conceptual mediation, but literature nonetheless, sorry, if you are disgusted at me, I'm more disgusted at myself. If, now I'm serious, I'm not kidding, if any of you has Claritin, I sell my mother into slavery if you give me a pill. Sorry, let me go on. You know Rebecca Comey's essay on the ending of phenomenology, where she makes exactly the same point, how while the whole drift of phenomenology is from representative thinking, art, religion, contingency of history, to conceptual structure, precisely to wrap it up, to do what Lacan would have called le pont de Capitole. Literature returns with a vengeance. And the problem is how to read it. Rebecca herself tends to oscillate a little bit. She's undecided in the sense of what if nonetheless this is a surprise for Hegel himself, no? No, I think... The Schiller, sorry, what did I say?
No.
Yeah. That eternity from the chalice of blah, blah, blah. What I think is that, no, Hegel is there totally consequent, because he is simply repeating or applying the same logic which is all around in phenomenology. How you have a process of mediation, conceptual mediation, but to bring this process to closure, you need a brutal regression at the end. For example, that's the whole point of Hegel's theory of, my internal point of reference, of monody. Yes, we are all, and here I would refer to nice remarks that were said about the Hegelian notion of language as this self-mediation, Bildung, self-realization. But then to get a modern state in which precisely our status does not depend on tradition, but basically we are just given space by the rational state, each of us, to create ourselves and so on, you need on the top a king who is the exact opposite, who is what it is only on account of stupid biological fact of being born in the right family, which would be the dream of all of us. But look, what I'm saying here is that I don't think that we can say here Hegel violates itself. It's a crucial mechanism of Hegel. So what I would say is that to bring Hegel close to you in a way, that the fact how we have to get in the endless process over literature to conceptual theoretical mediation, but to finish, to bring to conclusion this mediation itself, you need, as it were, a brutal return to some immediacy of, as Hegel would have put it, not Begriff, but Vorstellung, and so on and so on. It's absolutely crucial for Hegel. And this is why I agree with you. The same thing that you did with Marx, it would be wonderful to do it also with regard to Hegel, because you know that the greatness of Hegel's phenomenology is that there are no personal names in it. Antigone, is she named? I don't think that. Is she named? Maybe. Yes. But this is one of the few, I think, quotes from Goethe. Goethe is not named. Maybe Don Quixote. Diderot is not named.
No, that was never known.
Yeah, it tried. But
quoted.
Sorry?
Diderot is
Quoted but not named. The second thing to do is, this is the highest dialectical art, to put it ironically, Hegel's falsification of quotes. He always misquotes, change, text, but in the most ingenious way. Like here, I would like to repeat, you know, Stanley Cavell, a cinema theorist. He is legendary when he writes about, he wrote a quite nice book on comedies of remarriage, melodrama of the unknown woman, and some people simply notice that when he retells the story of a movie, he always tells it in a totally wrong way. I mean, empirically, he makes wrong description of the plot, and he did a wonderful thing in reply, Cavell. He said, sorry, I stand by all my mistakes, you know. And I think this would have been Hegel's answer, when pointed out that, for example, how subtly he changes the two lines which concludes phenomenology. Instead of im seine, its infinitude, its disinfinitude, and so on. I mean, Hegel also would be possible to answer
that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay. Now let me make just, and then I promise I will conclude, a couple of more concrete remarks. Beneath this critique of Marx, critique in the sense of, and I agree with all these movements, back to Marx from Hegel or in whatever direction, or I think that what is lurking beneath is also the big guy himself, the big question. What is the possible limitation of Hegel? And this is for me the question that I'm not alone here. With Matt and Alenka, we are awakening in the middle of the night with nightmare thinking about it. As we all know, this is a difficult question. Take Derrida, no? He was never simplistic here. He was always aware of this profound ambiguity of Hegel. For example, he even says in Glass, far from dismissing Aufhebung, in this simple way, oh, Aufhebung is the ideal sublation and something always remains resist. No, he says something quite surprising. He says there that the line that separates Hegelian Aufhebung from what he, Derrida, calls difference is so thin that it's almost imperceptible and so on. So again, Derrida is far from this simplistic view of Hegel, the ultimate idealist, everything mediated, then but something resists or whatever, no? When he, in his difference, the programmatic text, when Derrida directly raises the question, stupid question, but they are the best, who is the philosopher where difference is, who comes closest to, it's Hegel. It's Hegel. He quotes a precise passage, I think, from earlier Vienna manuscript or whatever, no? About precisely something close to what I was quoting yesterday, about this identity as Selbstabstoßen, about differing from itself and so on and so on.
As a quick parenthesis, at one point he actually described to me the difference between...
evoking private to both that you knew.
Between hard text and soft text. And Hegel's text is a hard text, which is to say that if you pick it here and you pick it here and you tap it here, no matter how you tap it or hit it, it remains totally intact. Whereas Benjamin is a soft text, you just poke it and it just unravels. Right? So that Hegel is a text that stays in some way.
Yeah. Let me just go on. So here, let me approach, I hate to have to agree with you, that's why I can approach now 2, 3 fundamental
He hates it even more when it's in public.
But that's it, we know, we hate each other and so on. No, Laden, did you go into den or only Klinamen? I'm sad because no, seriously, one line of this limitation of Hegel was developed nicely by Laden, and the best recapitulation of it would be the title of my book, Less Than Nothing. The notion, you know, Laden developed it, the notion of den as Democritus' name for ato, as literally a subtraction from meden, from nothing. So that, and the big problem is, can Hegel think, but really think, this type of very weird, to put it simply, negation of negation. That first you negate, I simplify it, something into nothing, and then the second move is not what we would expect in a primitive Hegelian way. Oh, but then nothing is a subordinated moment, you get a more complex something. No. You get even lower, as it were, than nothing itself. This is one big topic, and we are all, Laden, Alain, Camus, struggling with this in different ways. For example, what I am doing in my big fat book, which is appropriately called Less Than Nothing, it certainly doesn't weight less than nothing. No, with quantum physics, all my effort, it can be debated, do I understand it or not, but all my effort is precisely to look in so-called Higgs field and so on. A model for this less than nothing, because you know the formal definition, one of the definitions of Higgs field is literally that it's something less than nothing, something you have to subtract to get the void nothing itself. So, and this is not only at this abstract level. When there was here a colloquium a couple of months ago about the greatest dialectical materialist in Hollywood, Ernst Lubitsch, no? Aaron Schuster, one of our friends, developed in a wonderful way this notion of an optimism, which is, I can correlate, which is not like, let's say you are a stupid optimist, life has meaning and so on. Then you say life is shit or whatever. But then he claims in a wonderful way, then there is some, let's call it existential attitude, which is a stupid optimism, which is even lower than pessimism. Things get so bad that you cannot even properly kill yourself and so on. You know, like a weird optimism where it's such a shit that you even cannot do a radical act. And maybe I was thinking, but it's problematic. One way would have been to read I Hate later Kundera, Agent of Imperialism, Plato poet, but his first novel, which is still the best, I think, no? The Joke. You remember what happens at the end? The hero had an affair with a woman who is more of a, okay, the woman is desperate, she tries to kill herself, and the hero, hearing from her that she took poison and so on, runs to her and finds her at the toilet, shitting like crazy. By mistake, she took a bottle of laxatives instead. You know, like this total despair that you cannot even properly kill yourself. You know, this life goes on, but not in this optimist, stupid way. In spite of all the pain, humanity is something great. We should no, but it's so low that you cannot even properly kill yourself and so on. No? So this would be maybe an, how should I call it, existential counterpoint to this topic. And again, the problem is, can Hegel do it? Now, I didn't lose my track here, because I would like to connect this line of what Hegel cannot make me think with the, sorry, I really hate this, with the topic of the paper. I wasn't here, but spiritually I was here, on thermodynamics. Although I try always to save Hegel and so on, following Mladen, who developed this nicely, but I think, did you already publish? I don't think you did, your idea that we are all stealing about, which is, I'm still borrowing it for you creatively, about how Hegel cannot think pure repetition. That for Hegel, repetition is always, did you publish it already?
Yes.
What I want to say is that what was said about this move in Marx from more Hegelian notion of work to this thermodynamic notion, I think that maybe what underlies it is what Mladen demonstrated nicely, how paradoxically Hegel has a wonderful theory of repetition. You know, apropos Julius Caesar, Napoleon, but it's nonetheless repetition as an idealizing moment. Like, when it happens first, it's just empirical contingency. When it happens the second time, it's sublation into the ideal form. Like, Caesar dies, the first time, it's still personal name, just that singular Caesar. Second time, he returns, but as Caesar, the title. And the point here is that what Hegel maybe cannot think is a purely mechanical repetition, which is central, A, for Kierkegaard, and apparently at the other end for someone like Freud, Wiederholungszwang. A repetition which precisely doesn't have this moment of sublation. So, maybe I'm wrong, but I would have located this Marxist search for a thermodynamic model precisely into this, into this tendency to really think a post-Hegelian space. And I think the true post-Hegelian space is not all these stupidities of late Schelling or whatever, simply the space of some positive being. You know, this is the usual notion that you become post-Hegelian when you become aware that this ideal movement of self-mediation of the notion is just an abstract movement, that it had to have some firm foundation and so on. No, the true post-Hegelianism is a much more formal one. It's this pure repetition and so on. So, again, I know that the question was raised at the end about that this was the era of Marx, and that today we have another model. Now I will become much more dirty and concrete. What I'm saying is this. The problem is nonetheless that the entire theory of exploitation by Marx, and he thought that this is his great achievement, is nonetheless based on this model. So for me, when we talk about renovating, returning to Marx, repeating Marx, my first problem would have been what happens with his so-called labor theory of value and the entire model of exploitation. And a couple of times I was almost beaten in Latin America when I pointed to the obvious fact, which was ironically critical of Hugo Chavez, that, you know, Marx in Capital, when he emphasizes that natural resources are not a source of value, he gives exactly the example of oil. You know? So my idea was a very brutal one. If we apply Marx literally, directly, then Venezuela under Chavez is exploiting the United States. Because they are selling something which is not a source of value. Now, of course, I'm not claiming this. I'm just claiming that, my God, we have to do something with Marx's notion of that to approach all these questions. Just if you allow me, another short, very short point about when you said what you said about Benjamin aesthetization and so on and so on. But do you know Naden, who wrote that, the Chinese girl who wrote books mocking Brecht a little bit and so on? The Chinese woman, you gave me her text, Liu something to tell her. The Chinese girl who did a text mocking Brecht's extraniation. Okay, it will come.
No.
Yeah. What I'm saying is how then, okay, along those lines, yes. I would just ask you, but nonetheless, how then would you react to, like, when Benjamin says not politicization, not aestheticization of politics, but politicization of aesthetics and so on and so on, where is a place in Benjamin, nonetheless, to something like, for example, the example that I always quote, that tremendous, incredible thing in 1919, I think, when in Petersburg, Petrograd, they were celebrating, I think, the second anniversary of October Revolution, and it was a gigantic staging, artistic, where, as it were, people played themselves. And all the top guys participated, like, you know, name them, Kandinsky, Rodchenko, and so on. It was, and it was really a weird moment, and it was for the real. They played, they repeated the attack on Winter Palace and so on, and then it was not, now we return home to a good night's sleep, they had to go directly to the front then. But how would Benjamin account for this urge to stage, even in the middle of a revolutionary struggle, to stage revolution itself as an aesthetic event? And it's, as you probably know better than me, even I suspect, it's someone like Jacques Rancière who tries to rehabilitate this type of aestheticization. Now, I'm not saying Benjamin cannot do it. I'm just asking the question of, you know, how far can we go here and so on, because my final question would have been nonetheless this one. For example, and I don't mean this critically because I'm doing the same thing. When you were talking yesterday about how if we still dream about a society emancipated without sexism, without racism and so on. Okay, but for Marx all this was grounded in critique of political economy. And for me the key question, I agree with all that was said here. Yes, return to Hegel, theory of state, and so on, but what happens in all this with critique of political economy? I mean, that's for me the key question. Does it still apply? How we have to, whatever you call it, renovate, rethink, and so on? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, when you say what you said yesterday, okay, if I ask you, but what do you mean by emancipation? Is it still the emancipation that Marx had in mind, and so on? And here I think we should maybe move further in the traditional ways of the one interesting guy doing some interesting work, Moishe Postone in Chicago. He tried to prove where Marx himself, in key moments of Capital, maybe is not historicist enough. For example, the beginning, I think, is in chapter 5 or 7, when Marx provides the general non-historical, he emphasizes it, the definition of work. He does there something very strange. It's worth reading. He claims that if we approach labor as such, we don't need to take into account the social dimension. He says it literally. It's only worker on one side and the object on the other side, which is something very strange. Because why not? Couldn't we say that if we abstract from concrete societies, we get social being as such? Why? Marx thinks that the moment we move to the universal dimension, social dimension disappears. I would connect this with another symptomal point by Marx. When Marx describes in Grundrisse fragments, some of them, communist society, it's for me typical that he does the same thing. He says that in a communist society, production will become automated and so on, so we will have collective worker as a singular person, without social, on the one hand, just manipulating process and so on and so on and so on. I mean, we should, I think, begin to think all these limitations of Marx concretely, you know, because I think these are for me questions. I agree, I totally agree. My God, I'm the old totalitarian. We need to return to strong state and so on and so on. I even think, and this was the beautiful debate that I had with Etienne Balibar. He pointed out against, here I disagree with Alain Badiou, that if you look closely at Stalinism, what was so horrible about it? It was not state socialism. It was precisely that you had an extra state agency, Communist Party, which was systematically undermining, not taking seriously the state authority. Stalinism is absolutely not some absolutized state authority. You know, this is why, even at a superficial level, you can follow this. If you are old enough, you must maybe remember it from our own society, but generally, how do you remember when there was big foreign visitor to Yugoslavia? The same target was the top representative of party and state leadership received them. It was always party first. And this duality meant something very specific. I entered into this apropos when I wrote some pages, apropos, and with this I will finish, don't be afraid, apropos of some book on China today, which points out this in a wonderful way. China pretends to be, on the one hand, a normal state. You have ministries which are running, finances, blah, blah. And then you have a weird entity called the Communist Party of China. Why weird? Do you know that this party legally doesn't exist? There are literally no laws regulating it. And it's very because this fact reached a comical dimension when some 10 years ago a dissident went to a court to prosecute Communist Party for its crimes in the Great Leap Forward and so on. And after a couple of months, he got a wonderful answer. Sorry, but we cannot enact your prosecution because we didn't find anywhere in China any documents that would prove that the entity you are trying to prosecute exists. That is to say, I think this is absolutely crucial for the functioning of Communist Party. It controls the state, but it by definition never has a full legal status. It is in exception and so on and so on. In this sense, I would plead for Hegel. Against, I think that the problem with so-called state socialism is not a totalitarian state. No, it was that precisely the authority of state in the Hegelian sense, state of law, was systematically undermined. In this sense, I claim that the questions which are beneath all this has to be approached also in a critical way, also critically towards Marx. Because, you know, as I would like, and with this to conclude, to emphasize, yeah, we should save Marx with all the reading, blah, blah, blah. But we should nonetheless not forget a simple fact, which, even if it's all the time thrown at us by right-wingers, it's nonetheless in some sense true that fuck it, some of the most oppressive regimes of 20th century were legitimized by a reference to Marx. And what we cannot do is just to say, oh, they misunderstood Marx. But here I'm a Hegelian. When Hegel says, when some idea is realized, actualized in a wrong way, you should always blame also the idea. You cannot play the innocence, no? So again, with this I would like to conclude. I think that my reproach to so-called bourgeois or whatever critics of Marx, it's not that they are too critical of Marx, we should look for something good, still redemptive in Marx, but this really shocks me. They can't even do properly their critique of Marx. And that literally it's only we who can do it. What the world needs today is a good radical critique of Marx. Only we can do it. Thank you.
So, as I understand you, when there will be some basic theory constructed, then the political action will, very easily follow.
No, I'm not so optimistic. The first thing I would, if this question is addressed at me, okay, then I will be the first to sacrifice in a Christ, with a Jesus Christ-like greatness. I will take the burden from you. Seriously. I think that one thing I was aiming at when I made fun of so-called Hölderlin paradigm yesterday is that I don't think we can still continue with this game which even many of the very anti-totalitarian leftists are pursuing, that be patient, at some critical point there will finally be a true revolutionary movement, some authentic one without either Stalinist or social democratic alienation, where people, this big moment will never arrive, to put it brutally. I think this has to fall. You know, this expecting, even those who are most critical of Stalinism claim, yeah, this was false, but if anything, isn't this the saddest lesson of the last year? Western Marxists were all the time saying, when we lived in moderate prosperity, oh, this is a false peace. You will see when there will be a crisis. Okay, there was a crisis. Did you hear any consistent proposal of radical left, how to get out of this? So again, I'm not such an optimist as you. I think that the first duty of theory is precisely to put in question precisely this model. There will be a true theory that will come, and it's incredible how people expect from us intellectuals this theory. Like, I'm almost embarrassed, even people who made fun of me. Nonetheless, then they address me, but listen, tell us what is to be done. And you know, as if we intellectuals will provide finally the true theory, and then people will learn it and it will follow whatever. No, it will not. And much more, I'm not saying that things will just go on the way they go on. There will be dangerous moments, as you called it, catastrophes and so on. But I don't think this big event, which maybe even Benjamin was expecting, you know, when retroactively all the past will be redeemed and so on. I think maybe tragically and in a much more Hegelian way, we have to renounce this. There will not be a big revolutionary moment.
But also I think that the passage that I cited yesterday from Marx's letter to Beasley, where he says that anyone who has a program for the future is a reactionary. You cannot program change.
Yeah, but don't you think that nonetheless it's ambiguous? Because yes, I agree with you, I get it. But on the other hand,
we have to do something.
Yeah, it's very vulgar, pragmatic, but like, you know, when I started to annoy my Greek friends, okay, if Syriza wins, what will you do? I literally got first this type of answer. They were telling me 3 months ago, you come too early. Now we are in the face of resistance. When we take power, we will have to do a program. So don't push us too fast and so on. Okay, now they are there. What, you know, like, I agree with you. And here I'm a Hegelian. That no program for future means precisely not that we have to accept a standard alienation in the sense of history is impenetrable, we are always instruments of some, but simply in the sense that in the complexity of history, you cannot ever include into historical process reflexively the effects of your own intervention into it, as it were. That's, I would absolutely, yeah. But my answer would be, and yours also, We learners have to take a risk and intervene.
Yeah.
We have to take a risk.
And the risk that you take, I mean, which I think Benjamin takes and Marx takes and so on, is that they take the risk of ventriloquizing often the language of the system they're trying to overcome. And that risk is the risk of reform. I mean, the risk of that complicity is the condition of reform as well.
Yeah, but on the other hand, isn't it that
to say that danger,
if you do this, like here you should be more Derridean, but on the other hand, I'm almost tempted to say that somehow the most subversive thing may appear as just a repetition. This doesn't mean we should do no ventriloquizing, but just something original or whatever. Because people who are really original, we call them idiots.